So I decided, again, we're talking about collaboration, so we'll be talking about some of the collaborations that I've done with different partners in different ways, and especially focusing on how companies and other entities can collaborate with universities. Before I get started, just a little introduction to our department in case you're not aware, because a lot of people say, why is there a coatings program at North Dakota State University? And it all really got started about 1905 when the North Dakota legislature passed a law that regulated the quality of paints being brought into the state. Because of course, in the early 1900s, it was kind of the wild, wild west in paints, and a lot of companies were selling different packaged paints and things, and you never knew what you were going to get. And so Edwin Ladd is the person who really started the program. You can spend a lot of time, a lot of the reports from that era are scanned in online, and so you can read what paint technology was all about in that era, and it's really very interesting. We do think that maybe these are the first ever paint test fences. And when I've shown this slide, no one's ever said, no, I know somewhere where there were test fences before 1906. So if you know, let me know. But we think this was the first time people put samples out on tests and followed their properties over time. Our department is a standalone department in the College of Arts and Sciences. We only offer graduate degrees, master's and PhD, but we do have a minor at the undergraduate level. And we have about 28 students in our graduate program right now, mostly PhD students, and then about 15 in the undergraduate minor currently. I think we have world-class analytical capabilities that really help us in analyzing our materials. And we also have a combinatorial and high throughput laboratory that automates the synthesis of polymers and preparation of coating formulations. And later this year, we'll get some automated testing equipment. Faculty, we're a somewhat small department. Two people you might know. I mean, many of you have known Stuart Kroll over the years. He retired and moved to Canada, but still comes back periodically to meet with us. And then we have Eugene Caldona and Xiaoning Qi, who work on polymers for corrosion protection, and we have some posters from their groups at this meeting. And then Dr. Kadir does some flame retardant coatings, but also looks at materials in the body. Dr. Razalev is a computational chemist, so we're moving into the future here with AI and ML, machine learning. Andrei Voronov and I are both synthetic chemists and work in different areas related to that. We do have a number of adjunct faculty, many folks that you've seen at various companies that have interacted with us in the past, and we still keep relationships and collaborations going with them. So the organizing app sent me some information and said, to help you tailor your session to be more relevant and engage with providers and demographics. And so I wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to do with this. I was supposed to tailor the talk to the demographics of the attendees. So I just looked up information on Troy, Michigan. It's very interesting to me that the zip codes aren't in sequence. The mayor, Ethan Baker, some home of the two largest Protestant churches in the country. City name came from Troy, New York, and the ancient city of Troy. And then this was, I Googled, like that, they gave me a list of interesting facts about Troy, Michigan. And it had this one about the city walls. And I think it's not thinking of Troy, Michigan when it's telling me about city walls. So I think they mixed up the Troys. Of course, Kmart used to be headquartered in Troy, and I learned that the mayor makes $30.64 per hour. So if you're interested in that, I thought that was useful information. So we're going to get started with the real part of the talk. Again, I've been in the coatings industry since I left graduate school, first hired in at Sherwin-Williams and then moved to Eastman. One of the things that I think is just amazing about the coatings industry is all the different surfaces we develop materials for. And so it's a very diverse industry. We're not just making thermoplastics. You know, we're coating a lot of different things for both decorative and protective purposes. And again, a variety of different applications that are really very diverse in terms of their requirements and their needs, and in terms of the performance that's needed in those materials. We also use, we have a lot of different variations. We have, solvent-borne coatings, baking enamels, air dry systems, powder coatings, waterborne, UV curable. So there's a lot of different technology that's involved in coatings. And again, that keeps me engaged because I don't like to just do one thing. I like to move around and do lots of other things. Again, we also have a lot of different base chemistries that we use, so polyesters, acrylics, and so on. So again, one of the things I find very interesting about this industry is all the diversity in terms of the technologies and the applications, and it gives us a lot of opportunities, I think, to be creative and develop new materials. So if you had asked me 6 months ago, what's impacting the coatings industry, I probably would have said sustainability in all of its different forms. And so we have, emissions, reducing VOCs. We have reducing energy usage, making coatings and materials more durable and lasting longer, using sustainable bio-based resources to make our materials, and then also trying to, remove chemicals of concern. So chrome-6, isocyanates. And so all of those things, the coatings industry has really been focusing on. But of course, very recently, we've got a whole bunch of new things here. We have tariffs. And I think we have no idea what that means, right? We have no idea what that's going to bring to us. Of course, then that's supply chain issues. And so we're worried about those kind of things because that's what keeps our materials going. And the other thing is artificial intelligence. And what does that mean for the coatings industry? So all of those things have, especially the top two, have just hit us in the last couple of months. But then also thinking about how AI can carry us into the future and how that's going to influence the industry is will be important. So again, since I'm at a university, the focus of my talk is really going to be, collaborations with universities and university researchers. And so, of course, why would you want to collaborate with the university? Well, hopefully our faculty are forward-thinking and creative. We have a mindset that we want to do things that are new and kind of leading the technology. And so hopefully we can bring new ideas and concepts. Universities may have expertise that you don't have in terms of various components and coatings. We may have advanced analytical capabilities. And so be able to get information and test materials in ways that you're not able to do at your facilities. And then, of course, you might want to develop relationships with your future employees. And by getting to know universities, you can generate those relationships and then use that as a pipeline for your new hires that you need going forward. So there's really sort of three different ways that industry can collaborate with universities. One is you can do a joint project with external funding. And so a funding agency funds both the university and the company to do the work. The other is just direct funding of projects, where a company would fund a project at the university. And then the third is joining a consortium where universities involved. So I'll be going through examples from my own experience in all three of those areas. So I'll start off here. Many years ago, I got involved with a company called Luna Innovations, a relatively small business in Virginia, through personal contacts. They wanted to get involved in doing coatings projects. And there are government programs called SBIRs or STTRs that small businesses can tap into. And small business is a company with less than 500 employees. And so I was working on what I have there is epoxy functional polyurethanes, and really looking at that as a replacement for isocyanate functional materials, and where we don't have to deal with isocyanates at the end user. And so we partnered with them on a project for the Navy to develop non-skid coating for aircraft carrier decks. And using this polymer technology and developing it into a coating. And so in the upper right-hand corner is a picture I took of the deck of the Midway. And you can see that carrier deck has a lot of texture to it, but you can see it's also got defects and corrosion is starting there too. So we had a really nice partnership with Luna. At NDSU, since we're polymer synthetic chemists, we like to make variations on polymers and study what we call structure property relationships and make series of materials and see then how the properties change. And so we really took that on as a task. And then Luna's task was to look over our shoulder at what we were doing in the polymer chemistry and then decide which ones they wanted to pull through into coatings formulations. They also had some novel corrosion inhibitor technology they wanted to bring to this project as well. So again, it sort of allowed us to do what we need to do as a university, which is training students, developing knowledge, publishing papers. But then we were able to come up with a really nice formulation. And so some of the outcomes of this were the previous system or the current system is a two-coat system that takes days. So the primer needs a 12-hour cure, the non-skid top coat 24 hours to cure. Because our technology is a little more reactive than the traditional system, they were able to develop a single coat that would cure and be ready to go back into service in 12 hours. We also met or exceeded all of the properties you needed for a non-skid deck coating, which are really pretty severe and met all the weathering requirements. And so, again, very successful project. I wish we had been able to get this in the testing actually on a ship, but there's always a lot of hurdles with the government and getting that to happen. But we ended up with a novel system. We had 2 patents issue out of this and 3 journal articles that we were able to publish. So again, successful. That led into another SBIR project that we did for flexible primers for aircraft. And again, that was a very successful project to try to come up with a primer for aircraft aluminum that has good adhesion and is much more flexible. Next time you get on an airplane, you know, as you're waiting to enter the door, look around and you'll see the cracks by the rivets, and wherever there are seams, those coatings tend to crack. And so if we can find a primer that is able to be flexible enough that it doesn't crack around those seams, I think that would be a very positive thing. But we ended up with another project with them. So that then led to another project. Those were, again, funded by the government. So the government gave Luna the money, they subcontracted us, and so we were partners in that program for both the Navy and the Air Force. Later on, Covestro actually had a call for proposals from universities for different projects. And so we responded to that because we had worked on this epoxy functional polyurethane chemistry. And the way we make this is we react an isocyanate with glycidol to make the epoxy functional polyurethane. But one of the barriers to scaling this up was the cost of glycidol. Very, very expensive raw material, but it's also a bit hazardous. And so you have to really handle it under very strict conditions. And so we really wanted to come up with a more cost-efficient way to make this epoxy functional polyurethane. And of course, Covestro in the polyurethane business was interested in funding our project. We had initially proposed that we could take an epoxy and make it cyclic carbonate, react that onto our system, and then reverse this reaction to the epoxy. And as in a lot of research, we found this didn't work at all. And again, you find all kinds of literature where people are doing this reverse reaction, but in this system, it didn't work at all. We got a lot of byproducts. So actually, the side products that we formed were of interest, and we're actually filing patents on the side products as a different route to these cyclic materials. But anyway, it was like, what do we do, you know? And so I had a very smart postdoc at the time, and he said, well, can we, let me go back here. Can we put allyl alcohol on the urethane and then react that with oxygen to form the epoxy? And so, you know, we thought that's a better approach, but how do we do this epoxidation? There are current systems out there. The traditional peroxide method isn't good for terminal double bonds. And CPBA, you have a stoichiometric byproduct, so it's not very efficient synthesis. So we discovered in the literature that people were working on epoxidation or oxidations using what's called dimethylldioxirane, which we generate in situ, but we use this reagent called oxone to generate this polyether, this DMDO compound, which then can epoxidize double bonds. This is a very safe compound. You can go to any hot tub or pool store, and this is what's used as the oxidant to keep your pools clean. So you can just go buy it off the shelf. It's also in the denture cleaner tablets. So again, very safe reagent. The medium is water and the solvent is acetone. There's no exotherm in this process, and it's very, very efficient in epoxidation. We were able to use that for the epoxidation of the allyl compound. And it's very efficient, the NMR, carbon-13 NMR here. We would see peaks here if we hadn't fully epoxidized the system. So again, 100% conversion, very safe reagents, done at room temperature. And so again, that was a very good outcome of that. It also leads us to a whole new class of epoxyurethanes, because now we're decoupling the epoxy formation from the polyurethane formation reaction. And so we've actually discovered that with these multifunctional epoxies, we can make a compound like this. There's more on the other side that has multiple epoxy groups. And we've discovered that we can cure these systems at very low temperatures as well, because these are really reactive. So again, very good discovery we had with this system. So some of the outcomes, a safer and more cost-effective route. We have a number of patent applications filed. I lost count because we had a lot of variations on the chemistry. And then the project with Webster had to come to an end. And so now we have a new project started with a government agency called CERDIP to do more optimization of the process and then really try to take this technology into applications for the government in DoD type applications. So successful in that we're able to continue the work and add on more projects. Another project we had that was, again, jointly funded by a government organization and the company was where we made some novel furan diols. And we had a project with the state of North Dakota called the Center for Bio-Based Materials Science and Technology. And whenever you had a project through that funding mechanism, you had to have a company partner, and it could be in kind or cash in terms of the company partner. And so AkzoNobel joined us on this. And for this work, I collaborate with my outstanding organic synthesis faculty member, Professor Siddy in the chemistry department. And with this, we did a whole series of diol compounds from furan. So these are compounds that are being commercialized. FDCA is being commercialized now. HMF is the precursor. And then these other materials can be made from HMF. And then his group synthesized all of these different diols that have this furan ring in the middle. And one of the things that Akzo helped us with was actually doing the endocrine studies to compare the endocrine activity with bisphenol A. So of course, bisphenol A has endocrine activity, and so there's a concern with bisphenol A in humans. And so we want to see, do these have any improved toxicology studies or toxicology? And most of those diols either had almost no activity or very, very low activity compared to bisphenol A. So could potentially be safer replacements for bisphenol A. And so one of the things we have done with these is made epoxy resins out of selected ones. Down at the bottom here is the familiar EPON 828. And we cured this with isoferone diamine just to do an initial study of these in coating formulations. And you can see we've got, really hard coatings, very solvent resistant coatings, a little brittle, but all of these had much better adhesion than the bisphenol A epoxy. And so we think maybe that extra oxygen in there helps with adhesion to substrates. And so again, we're very interested in moving this technology forward and seeing if it can be actually commercialized. Of course, one of the big issues that you deal with in working with the university is intellectual property. And that's often a big hurdle that needs to come in, that comes in when you're trying to set up a project. A lot of universities these days have made more industry-friendly IP policies for projects. And so I would say, talk to the university and see what their different opportunities are or different ways of handling IP. I think a lot of universities started recognizing that, not every patent is a Taxol or a Gatorade and going to make a lot of money. And so we need to be much more realistic and set up the IP agreement so that if it's a big win, we all share in that. But for small things, let's not create a barrier from getting work done. So again, I would say, have a win-win mindset that we want to really be partners, and we might, share in the IP in useful ways. Consortiums. So another way to participate with universities is through a consortium. So a consortium program, the members usually contribute financially with an annual fee to join a consortium. The funds are then pooled and then specific projects are funded by the consortium. The members have input in the projects. Consortium members can have access to project results and most of the time access to IP that comes out of consortiums. There are different types of consortiums. Many of them are sort of government sponsored. So I'll tell you about our Center for Bioplastics and Biocomposites, which is a NSF, National Science Foundation Industry University Cooperative Research Center. And I think there are about 30 or 40 of those in the US right now. Department of Defense has these manufacturing innovation institutes. One that we're partnered with is called BioMade, and that was really to spur the development of new chemicals from biological roots and those types of things. And then there are centers that are there and they're sort of independent. So one that I'm really aware of is iPrime at University of Minnesota. That used to be an IUCRC, but after the NSF funding ended, they kept on going as a center. So they're still operational. So I'll tell you about our Center for Bioplastics and Biocomposites. We're really focusing in on developing knowledge that's going to let us make high value added products starting with agricultural feedstocks. And of course, we want it to be compatible with current manufacturing systems. Center leadership. So we have 4 different universities that are part of the center. So I'm the director at North Dakota State. And then we have Chad Olvin at North Dakota as the site director. Carl England is at Washington State University. Eric Cochran at Iowa State University, and then Jason Laughlin at University of Georgia. And so we lead the center that's distributed among those 4 universities. And again, it's a National Science Foundation funded center. Current membership is very interesting because we have members from all different parts of the value chain. So we have ADM and Cargill, who start with biological materials and process that into chemicals. We'll have other converters and producers like BASF, but then end users like Sherwin-Williams, AkzoNobel, and Medtronic even. So again, we kind of span the value chain in terms of the members that we have in our consortium. Strategic roadmap, I know you won't be able to read the fine print. You can always look on our website. But we really work in a lot of different areas. We work in the areas of modeling, of course, synthesis of materials. How do we derive chemicals from biomass? How do we then turn those into polymers or into various types of materials? We do quite a bit of work in processing. We do focus on different types of products. So Washington State University does a lot in bio-based composites. NDSU does a lot in coatings. University of Georgia does a lot in this area of deriving things from different cellulosic type materials. Again, so we do biocomposites, either the fiber part or the resin part. And then in our phase 2 program, we ended considerations of end of life. So how do we design materials so that up front you build into the design so that they can be degraded or recycled or reused when they reach their end of life. So a number of different projects related to that. One of the things we like to promote is the fact that when you join a consortium, membership fees are really leveraging a lot of resources. And so our large company membership fee is $35,000 a year. We're actually one of the lower cost NSF centers, but you're leveraging, $800,000 in terms of research. There's some NSF support, university cost share, and other things that you're leveraging up to $1 million per year in resources through that membership fee. And again, you get knowledge as part of the center. Anyone who joins at any point, will be able to tap into every project that's been done since the center started. One of the things that we do is we're really have a tight interaction between our members and our projects. We ensure that every project that's being executed has monthly meetings with industry mentors. And so industry members who are interested in those projects join in and follow those projects throughout the year. And so we really have a tight relationship there. Again, we have opportunities for, hiring interns and graduates. Collaboration among the industry peers is very important. We're always being told when we have our meetings, we need to leave plenty of networking time for people to talk to each other. And we've seen those synergies develop where, different companies may have different interests or similar interests that they can sort of pool their emphasis together and direct some of the projects. Just a list of the projects we're doing in 2025. Again, our projects go year by year, but we have all kinds of different things. Looking at blends of bio-based materials, looking at cellulosic materials, but also, developing some basic information. So how do we rank the performance of different bio-based materials and trying to understand that? So again, a variety of different projects, and the IAB, our board, is the one that decides which project proposals get funded each project year. So I'm going to wrap up with just another example of a collaboration. Now, it's not industry collaboration at this stage, but I think it's shows just the power of collaborating and how you can bring people with different sets of expertise together to solve some problems. So we've been working with the Navy for quite a long time. And of course, issues that plague the Navy are biofouling. And on ship hulls, this has a lot of negative consequences. But also ice accumulation. Now that the Navy is moving further and further north and operating in more northern latitudes, ice accumulation is an issue. And this is probably not the best way to get rid of the ice. If you can find some other way, you're probably better off. So several years ago, we had been working with the Navy on trying to come up with non-toxic ship hull coatings that were tough and durable. So we'd had a lot of experience in that, and we did a series of coatings. We won't go through the specifics of the compositions, but you can see we assess barnacle adhesion. Yeah, if you come to Fargo, you can actually see live barnacles in our lab. We use those as test organisms. But you can see there's some trends here in adhesion that follow the compositions of the coatings. And just sort of by happenstance, my student says, can we just test ice adhesion on these? And when we tested the ice adhesion, we see that the pattern of adhesion on the same set of coatings almost can be overlaid. So we shared that with the Navy, and they're like, wow, we're really interested in that because, you guys are working in biofouling, but ice buildup is a big issue for us. So let's see if we can pursue that more. So we worked through finding funding to set up a fairly large project. And so we set up an initial team at NDSU. Shane Stafflin runs our marine testing lab. He's been there for a while. We brought in a professor from physics, Andrew Kroll, who's an expert in adhesion. Because the more you understand adhesion, you can figure out how to make a coating that things can't stick to. Professor Tuteja at University of Michigan is an expert on coatings that have low ice adhesion. So let's bring in that expertise. And then we have folks that do testing with marine organisms, a group at Newcastle in the UK and a group in Florida. And so we're really looking at the synergies, so what coatings kind of coatings that we've been developing for ship hulls, how might that technology translate to anti-ice coatings, but also what types of coatings have been looked at for low ice adhesion that might work as a marine coating. And so we get that crossover. But then we went ahead and added some other folks. So We added computational folks. So Dr. Razalev in our department does AI machine learning type work. And then Wenji Shia was at NDSU and moved to Iowa State, but he does multi-level type modeling. So let's add the computational aspect to this program. And we couldn't stop there. We added some other expertise. So we brought in Emily Asenath-Smith, who's at the Cold Regions Research and Engineering Lab run by the Army Corps. So again, they have a lot of expertise in anti-icing materials and studying those materials. And then we also brought in some folks from NAVC to do some further coatings testing. So again, bringing in more and more people, we can really hit a lot of different aspects of coatings development and hopefully then make us more successful in getting things that could be scalable. So if you're interested what to do next, well, find some university researchers that are doing things you find interesting. How do you do that? Well, sometimes you can go to conferences and network. Of course, everyone's got websites these days, so you can kind of look around and see who's doing some work that's relevant to the kinds of things you're interested in. And then maybe identify relevant consortia, because consortia is a pretty low cost entry into collaboration with universities. And you might be able to find one that really fits, what your company's goals are. So I'll wrap up with a little advertising. At NDSU, we do short courses every summer. Our coating science course is coming up the first week in June, and then corrosion prevention right after that. We do have a registration deadline of May 9th. If you're interested, I got a QR code that'll take us to the website. If you see me, I can give you a code to get the early discount because the early registration is passed, but I can give you a code to get that price. But again, the registration deadline is next week. We also have a conference coming up in July called the International Symposium on Materials from Renewables. So we bring in folks who work on bio-based materials. And so we have a pretty full schedule going with that. Again, registration for this symposium is pretty economical. And you can come up to Fargo in July when the weather is absolutely perfect and see what different people are doing. And again, on their website is a lot of information on the different speakers that are coming. So I want to thank everyone that supported our research. Just some of my groups, pictures from the last few years, and then a number of the organizations that we've been able to partner with and that have supported our work. And I would be glad to answer any questions you might have.
So we have two ways to address questions. You can put the question into the HOVA app on your phone, or you can raise your hand and we'll get this microphone to you to ask a question. I don't see any. Dean, I'll get things started. When you talked about the working with different companies, Luna, Axo, Covestro, it seemed like some of them were very hands-off and said, you do all the work. In the case of Axo, they did something with the endocrine disruptors. Do you get that all set up ahead of time, or is it always the same? Or how much involvement do you get with a company sponsor?
So it can vary from project to project. I would say none of the company partners we've had have really been hands-off. I mean, most of the time we'll have regular meetings just to follow, see what the progress is and give us some feedback. And I know as we were developing the furan-based materials, we got a lot of input back from the folks at Axo in terms of especially the container coating market, and a lot of information that we weren't aware of in terms of what the requirements are there. Covestro, again, we had regular meetings and a very close collaboration there with the scientists there, including folks from Germany as well as the US. So most of these projects, we do get quite close collaboration. And in some cases, there's sample exchange and things, so we can make things, send them to their labs for evaluation.
From the audience?
Yeah, John.
Yep.
Dr. Webster, there's a question on the app here. What percentage of research projects are presented or shared publicly, or does it vary?
So again, one of the issues that we have as a university is one of our missions is to share knowledge. And especially as we have students and researchers, postdocs that work on the projects, you know, we very rarely can do a whole project and not share anything publicly. Because one of our missions is to publish. Now, we often, with a company partner, will get pre-approval for anything we share to make sure we're not, you know, disclosing anything that's particularly proprietary. But that is one of our missions, is to share information. And so very few of these projects do we not publish anything at some point. But if there's IP to protect, we'll protect the IP before we do any of that.